A disciple is a learner, a student, but not just any student. A disciple is particularly devoted to one master, one teacher. He or she wants to absorb everything about the teacher that they are devoted to. They want to be just like their master. Typically, in the time of Jesus, disciples started off as teenagers, some perhaps as young as 13 years of age. It might help to keep that in mind as we are inclined to think of Jesus' first disciples as grown men already with long beards. Last week's gospel and this week's gospel both teach us something about discipleship. Both are from Mark's Gospel, chapter 10. Interestingly, in both passages, Jesus asks the same question. What do you want me to do for you? In last week's gospel passage, James and John asked to be given positions of honor on the right and on the left side of Jesus when he comes into his kingdom. Perhaps we can say James and John, in their immaturity, were looking at what they could get out of being a disciple of Jesus. On the other hand, in today's gospel passage, when Jesus asked the blind beggar, "What do you want me to do for you?" Bartimaeus simply asked that he might see. Yes, there was a physical healing. Bartimaeus' sight was restored. But Bartimaeus is also held up symbolically as an ideal disciple. Someone who knows that he, like all true disciples, is metaphorically blind. He will only be able to see beyond the darkness of this world if Jesus gives him eyes to see. He knows that his master, Jesus, is the divine physician who alone is capable of giving him vision into spiritual reality. So recently, every year we get together, the major religious superiors in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia get together with the Archbishop. This year we did that a few weeks ago, and we were given a presentation by two men, one of whom was from Catholic Leadership Institute, CLI for short. And the Archbishop wanted us to hear of the ambitious plan to change the trajectory of the Catholic Church in Philadelphia from one of ongoing diminishment to one of growth. So CLI started out by saying, in order for us to go from point A to point B, from diminishment to growth, we have to know where point A is. And among other things, he said a couple things that were a little bit disturbing. 83% of the Catholics of this archdiocese, 83%, do not attend Mass on Sunday. Only about 200,000 Catholics in this archdiocese, out of 1.5 million, attend Mass each weekend. I don't know if any of you can remember back to the 1950s, but in the 1950s, approximately 80 to 90% of Catholics attended Mass. So it was explained by the speaker from CLI that we are no longer living in a Christendom model of society. Christendom, a Christian society, a society based on Christian values, a society where Christianity is supported. We live rather in we used to live in a culture that used to embrace and reinforce the status of the church and basic Christian culture. Now, societal pressures are more likely pushing in the opposite direction. So they told us that if we are to see a change in the trajectory of Christian diminishment in our world, we must first recognize that the Christendom model is no longer functional. It will be fruitless to nostalgically wish for that model to return. We're never going to go back to the 1950s. We must embrace a new model of behavior, or perhaps, more precisely, to embrace a very old model, the model of the Apostolic Church, when the world was not Christian, where the disciples had to step forward with courage and faith. It's a model in which each Christian recognizes the demands of true discipleship and commits to give authentic and unashamed witness to the Lordship of Jesus Christ and actively participates in the ministry of the Church. Passive Christianity, passive Catholicism, where we let others take the responsibility, where we leave it to others to do the work of the gospel, will mean that we will die, Catholicism will die a slow death, but a death nonetheless. If our mediocre discipleship is nothing more than a feeble attempt to get something for ourselves, like the immature James and John, when they asked for positions of honor, then our faith will slowly dissolve in the face of the harsh onslaught of a culture that is very unfriendly to the witness of the self-sacrificing and compassionate Christ. The world and our church, as much as ever, needs Jesus. He alone is the Prince of Peace. He alone is the Lord and healer of all. But we will not experience, our world will not experience the saving presence of Jesus without authentic, fervent disciples of Jesus who will help the world to encounter him. I'm going to say that again. The world will not experience the saving presence of Jesus without authentic and fervent disciples of Jesus who will help the world to acknowledge him and encounter him. I think we could say that our church cannot survive ultimately unless we have more disciples like that of Bartimaeus. Imagine, in his blindness, he gives us an example. In his blindness, he cries out, "Jesus, Son of David!" He just knows that Jesus is the one who can save him. Jesus is the one who can heal him. Do we know that Jesus is the one who can save us? Do we know that Jesus is the one who can heal our society? Can we call out to him unashamedly, "Jesus, have pity on us." He called out to the Son of David and dropped everything to draw near to Jesus. And he asked simply that he might see with the eyes of a true disciple, beyond the darkness of this world around us. So there's not just physical blindness. I think our society is in many ways blind to what is happening, to who our brothers and sisters truly are, to who Jesus is for us, to what is needed in order for our society to heal. Much of the society is blind, and we too share to some degree in that blindness. Only the Lord Jesus can give us this vision. Only the Lord Jesus, I believe. I'm not ashamed to say it. Only the Lord Jesus can give us this vision. And the gospel strikingly tells us that Bartimaeus, from that point of encounter on, followed Jesus. It's significant because he followed him from Jericho to Jerusalem. Now, you know what happens in Jerusalem, right? And they knew that there was trouble. Maybe they didn't know the full extent of the kind of trouble they would encounter. But Jesus was heading to Jerusalem, and they knew there was trouble waiting for them in Jerusalem. But Bartimaeus was the kind of disciple who knew that Jesus is the only one who heals, who saves. He is the only master worth serving. I think today's gospel is asking us, are you, am I ready and willing to be that kind of disciple? Are we willing and able to not only follow Jesus unreservedly, to put our lives on the line to become true and effective witnesses of Jesus in the world, but to help those who need to encounter the healing, saving love of Jesus? Are we willing to be disciples like that? If none of us are, our future is not bright. Our church can succeed, can thrive, only if we give our lives to Christ as true disciples.